3,000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. Before we start today's episode, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share this video, follow us on Instagram, do all that stuff. I want to keep bringing you more 3000 podcast episodes, and the only way that I'm going to be able to keep doing is people support the channel. So do that. It costs you nothing. It takes a second. I appreciate it. Now let's get to the episode. Cheers. What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by a producer, a drummer, musician, musical artist, artist in general, Plutonic Lab. Thanks for coming, man.
Cheers, man. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Thanks for making the journey, I have to say.
Yeah.
Man, this one's been a long time coming. We were talking about doing this over 12 months ago, and I'm glad that we finally got it to happen.
Yeah. I don't know, like last year was a pretty difficult year for me just to be out and about and do stuff like this, to even talk about things. So
Okay.
I think like I've had a bit of distance on that now.
Better, you're in a better place?
Feeling a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Cool.
Not to be too heavy right off the bat, but sorry about that.
This is what it's about, man. Every day, pretty much after I have a chat with someone, people message me afterwards and like, do you know what? I feel better about that. Like,
yeah.
It's somewhat of a therapy session.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's heavy for me.
Not too much.
Sometimes, man, that's generally why I don't do 2 episodes in a day.
Right.
Like if I get 2 heavy
Just a bit
episodes,
taxing sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll get home and like collapse, man.
Wow. Holy shit. What have these sessions been like? Oh my God.
Some people have been through it.
Just unloading.
Yeah. I got to say, and this is a bit embarrassing for me, but when I was young, growing up, I thought Platonic was Platonic, not Plutonic. Do people get that?
It would have made more sense. I think my pseudonym, stage name, whatever you want to call it, has not made much sense, and it actually got that name through. It's like I didn't like choose it, well, I kind of did, but like it was a weird series of events that don't make any sense anyway, and I ran with it. It was meant to be kind of like sort of the name of our little production spot, and then I just ran with it as an artist name because why not? I don't know.
It works.
It kind of, well, sort of, I guess.
Yeah.
I've just stuck with it. I've thought about changing it like years ago as well, but like I'd already done too much shit under the title. So
when I was in my teenage years, I thought it was like a lab for homies to hang out, like the Plutonic Lab. That's kind of what I thought. And then I realized later, no, it's Plutonic, not Platonic.
Yeah. Well, in a weird way, like I should turn my notifications off, man. I'm actually completely spoiling this. But yeah, it actually, like the name comes from an MC from Melbourne whose name was Pluto back in the 90s.
Yep.
And he coined this phrase, and which we ran with for a record label. This was back in the mid-90s. And the lab part was kind of like, if we're going to call our label Plutonic Lovely, which was his phrase, I'll just put the lab part, Plutonic Lab, and that can be like the sort of production side of what we're doing, our little sort of like our home studio kind of thing. Yeah, and then it just sort of became like, what am I going to do? Because I'm starting to do stuff as an instrumental, kind of like releases or whatever. Yeah. I'll just run with that. Maybe I think there was like a real pushback internally not to. Like I can, if you look at my old credits, they're just a bit of a jumble of what I'm actually going to like call myself. I almost didn't want to be like, it's sort of almost veiled in a way. Like, is this a person? Is this a crew? Is this a band? What the fuck is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you've got to think back then in the 90s, man, you could stay somewhat anonymous because there was no internet for people to find out who you are.
No one would know. Have any be any wiser. Yeah, it could be anything. It could be the Wu-Tang Clan. Who knows?
They didn't know.
Yeah.
And that is cool. Now people, Wikipedia and everything, they'll find out who you are pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, my Wikipedia is pretty terrible. I don't think much of it's really completely true.
According to Wikipedia, you're 43 years old.
That's not true.
Which, when you do the maths, if you're making music, making albums in the mid-90s,
No.
You know what I mean?
I turned 55 in December.
Yeah, but that just goes to show you the internet's not always right.
Yeah, no, it's terribly wrong. So, yeah.
So let's talk about your journey, man. I know you started playing music, or you started playing drums in primary school.
Yeah.
And then you kind of went into a musical schooling sort of path?
Not really.
No?
Like, Well, I grew up like my dad was a Hammond organ player.
Yep.
So and I grew up in a house where I had an older sister and an older brother who were quite a bit like older. Um, and by the time I was born, they'd kind of like one had died and one had left the house, sort of had got married and stuff. So I grew up with my adopted sister who came along a couple of years before me, and our house, we had like one room in the house that was just full of like either stuff that my older siblings had left there because they'd both been, had a musical instrument.
And they just wanted to leave this stuff when they moved
Yeah,
out.
or that my dad had accumulated. So we had kind of like everything from like, keyboards to, guitars, bass guitars, violins, like all kinds of stuff. So I grew up in a house where we had a music room.
Were you allowed to play with that stuff as a kid?
I was allowed to play with some of it, and then some of it was kind of like my dad's kind of like working stuff because he would like play shows and stuff. But didn't really deter me much. Like I would have this method of like pulling all the shit out and using it, and then just like trying to put it back exactly how it was in the
You were
in the
curious.
cases. Yeah, like I wanted to figure out how it all works. So I guess that was like, in the 70s. This was so. Just figuring out how if I plug a guitar into a Leslie spinning speaker, like what does that sound like, or blah blah blah. Just figuring out how things. What they sound like and what each instrument kind of does.
Yeah.
And so that was the start of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so as somebody who was curious, it must be amazing to have that whole room full of stuff. You can figure out, all right, this is something I show a little bit more interested in. This is something I show a little bit less interested in. Were there drums in there as well?
Not really. We had a snare drum,
Okay.
but not a drum kit, I think. I figure like a lot of this stuff is definitely like with people getting into whatever they're into is environmental to a certain degree, I think.
You don't think it's nature?
I think you can have a natural ability, but I don't know. I'm convinced it's just kind of like what you're exposed to,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so
So you
I had a cousin who was like a little bit old, like quite a bit older than me, who I thought was like, when you're a little kid and you have a teenager that's a cousin, you think they're the coolest thing in the world. He lived in a bungalow at the back of his parents' place, so already like had his sort of records, and he had a drum kit, right? So we'd go over to their place, and there was this drum kit there, and I was like, I thought it was the coolest shit ever,
Yeah.
So I think I hounded my parents for a drum kit, and I was made to do lessons for, I think it was like 6 or 12 months, with just on a practice pad and a snare drum.
Yeah.
And then
They were encouraging.
they were encouraging. I mean, they wanted me to learn an instrument. I picked the most sort of violent instrument I could have picked, probably the most
That's like the
upsetting
violins
to
over
their
there.
to their environment. But so I think it was a test to see if I was going to stick with it or not to do the lessons,
Yep.
So I got through that, and then one day came home in primary school, came home, and there was a drum kit set up, and
Wow.
it was pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. So what are we talking now? You're like primary school age still?
Primary school, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, I think, somewhere around there.
And then you're obviously still doing other kid stuff, but music was just something that you consistently did.
Yeah, it was just like, I mean, it was just part of our household, just listening to music and playing records and
rock music, or did your dad listen to classical stuff?
Jazz mostly. My mum was sort of more into pop music of the day, and then they just had all these old-timey songs and shit that they all knew.
Okay, so you're surrounded by music, but you know it's not really what you're into, but you don't know what you're into.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was like I was into music, I guess, but like my mum used to bring home like 7-inch records and stuff and buy records for us and give them to me and my sister as like presents and stuff. Yeah. So it was like a regular thing, I guess.
Extremely musical family, though.
I guess so, but I mean, yeah, like even at like family get-togethers and stuff, I remember like, in school holidays where there would be like jams happening. Yeah. Like, that would be part of like the family getting together with like people would play music and stuff. So.
Yeah. And I guess it just seems normal to you, but that is, from an
Yeah,
outsider
yeah.
looking in, that's
Yeah,
pretty
I mean,
musical.
yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, yeah. It just seemed like, doesn't everyone do this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, probably not so much.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people listen to music, but at family get-togethers where they have a jam, that's a pretty musical family, I'd say, man.
Yeah. I mean, my mum wasn't jamming, but like it was my dad and some cousins and friends and stuff. You know?
Still cool.
Yeah.
So then you do that. You go to high school. You finish. You start your high school career, and you're doing music at school.
Yeah, I had like I went to high school. This is in East Preston, so I grew up. That's where I grew up, north of Melbourne. Tried sort of having a few sort of school bands, but I couldn't really find anyone that was like fully kind of was going to dedicate themselves to really learning songs and doing. It was always just fucking around, basically.
Yeah.
So in high school, I think, and I changed schools. In year 11, I swapped schools from high school to Darebin College. It was, which I don't think exists anymore. But it was like they had a really crazy arts school. Yeah, so they had like a crazy photography department and a video department. They had like pretty much like a TV studio set up with like the huge like cameras and stuff, so you could like video stuff and video
in the late 80s.
This is like 86, 87.
So that's pretty cool. That's pretty forward sort of thing.
It is, yeah. I had a really big art department, and just I think that's because I was really bored in high school, and I was probably, I don't know, maybe undiagnosed, spicy brained, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I got to this Darebin College, and it was like, oh well, I kind of thrived there because it was like I got to do art pretty much.
So then, are you playing other instruments? You're just focusing on drums, but you've got the wider appreciation for music.
Yeah, I mean, obviously dabbling in lots of stuff, and surprisingly, like I didn't really learn. Like my dad didn't really teach me music much. Like he just had really not much patience. So it was more just like me picking stuff up and figuring it out. So I was always playing keys, and bass was another thing that I'd like to play. Like even in school bands, I'd sometimes pick up the bass and play bass.
Had it crossed your mind at this stage when other people aren't really towing the line when it comes to creating a band that you can kind of do it yourself? Do you think about that at that stage?
Yeah, I was already doing stuff like at home. Like I didn't have a 4-track cassette deck, which were around in the 80s. They were just expensive. I had 2 kind of like 80s kind of boom boxes. Yeah, kind of like the things you have hanging up here. And I would just record to one and then just overdub while recording to the next one, which is kind of like people know this method now, but this is just me without the internet, without anyone telling me how to. You just figure this shit out. Yeah, you just do it. You're basically recording the room environment as well with the next. So every time you do an overdub from one to the other, it kind of gets super degraded and
which is a cool effect sounding. You go to use later on.
It is,
but at the time you go.
Yeah, I mean, I figured out this one way of like getting the drums to sound super, like it's sounding really good is just to make a pause tape. So like you would just get like a record with a drum break on it without really knowing what drum breaks were. But like, here's a record, it's got the drums kind of at the start of it. I'll just get a cassette, and every time the 2 bars goes around, I'll pause the tape and put it back, record another 2 bars, and pretty much you get a minute of really cool, like, you get Led Zeppelin drums or something for a minute, and then you can put a bass guitar over the top of that using 2 cassette players.
And are you trying to emulate music you're hearing, or are you just creating music from scratch that you didn't know existed?
I don't think I was really good enough to emulate anything. I think I was just sort of like, you just come up with stuff. It's like, this sounds like a thing, you know what I mean? This sounds like something maybe I would hear on a recording or whatever, but I don't know what genre of music this is or whatever,
So we're talking like mid-80s now.
This is mid-80s. This is me as like a 15-year-old or something.
So there is hip-hop out there, but not much that you're going to hear in
really.
Suburban Melbourne.
No. Like I remember the first, like, obviously like I heard The Message and all that kind of like Grandmaster Flash was a thing. And when I remember actually orientation at high school, coming from primary school, and in orientation there were kids like in the drama class with just like kind of cardboard on the ground and all trying to fucking break dance. That was like a real big thing. But I remember it being kind of like more like a lot of electro actually.
Yeah.
Like, so there was rap music, but there was also like other music that would be good to like dance to as well.
Yeah, I guess because that's in that mid-80s, that's when, the Moog stuff and all that synthesized 808
Yeah,
stuff
just like lots of drum machine music and just, really like sort of that sort of energy. And I remember going into like this, like I get the tram into the city sometimes to get records or whatever, and City Square was a thing, and kids would like break dance down there.
Yeah. The Yellow Peril was there back then.
Yellow Peril was there. It was the old City Square, so it used to look like it did in the early to mid '80s, you know. And yeah, so it was around. I was just into lots of like I've always have been, and I still am. I've got a pretty broad taste in music, and it was just one of many things I listened to, you know.
Was your dad embracing of the electronic stuff, or he was too? He wasn't at all. No, because some people are open-minded.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. No,
It's like that's not real music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I think like I don't know if like this was like a real thing in the '80s, especially when drum machines started becoming affordable. People really thought that sequencers and keyboards and drum machines were stealing musicians' jobs.
It's like AI
it was that thing. It was like, there's so many of these technologies came with kind of like these caveats of like, even cassettes, like, that whole thing you used to put on, home taping is killing music and stuff. It was the same with kind of like any sort of technology that made things sort of easier, that you could just eliminate people. Yeah. I don't need a drummer. I'm just going to be a one-man band with my acoustic guitar and have a drum machine or whatever. Yeah. Like there's pushback on some of that stuff. And I think like my dad's generation, because he was older, like my parents, they were older people. Like I think he just had a bit of like a old brain with that stuff, and it wasn't legit,
Yeah, because I guess he's almost like 2 generations older, because you you were young.
Yeah. I mean, I was the youngest of the kids, and they sort of blah blah blah.
Yeah. So he's not accepting you're doing that sort of stuff, but you're like, this is what I want to do. You've not focused.
Oh yeah.
You knew.
I mean, that was a thing all through growing up, because it's pretty like working class environment. It was expected you would probably go and get a trade, and that was the sort of no one I knew was really thinking about going to uni. Like it was just sort of like very working class. No one was doing art. Art was like it's a joke, basically. Like,
but your dad was professional.
I know. Well, by the time I came along, I think he was like, he came from like it's pretty interesting. Like he used to, in Australia, we had kind of like a vaudeville thing, which was like the Tivoli Theatre and stuff. This is back in the 40s and 50s. So he was part of that thing. Yep. So he would like, that was his thing until I think he probably got serious about having a family and working a job and supporting, his family and stuff. So it became, by the time I came around, it became like a weekend thing. Yeah, okay. So it wasn't like his main bag. He had a proper job. And
I guess, and he can also say from his point of view, that's a great hobby, but if you want to have a family, you're going to have to get a real job.
Totally that. It was just like, it's a good hobby. You should learn an instrument. Like, are you fucking crazy? Like, you're not going to be, this is not a good idea to like, try and make this your main bag,
Yeah. But I guess it does sort of help that he has had endeavors in that, so for him to kind of get it a little bit.
Yeah, just like he really put his foot in it. Like, he should never have had those instruments lying around,
It's your fault I'm creative.
Yeah, exactly right.
So then at school, you finished school, you still haven't really formed a band or anything?
There are like, I was always in and out of bands. Like, well, what happened in late, so at Darabin College, I met some kids because it was like, you got East Preston and then going to school in Northcote, you're kind of halfway there to like the inner city. Yep. So I'd met kids who sort of weren't so much from the northern suburbs. They were kind of like a little bit more sort of like maybe Fairfield, and like, you're getting sort of a little bit closer to Clifton Hill. And
it's all very working class though then.
It's still, I guess so, but like there were more academics and stuff floating around. There were more kids who had, teachers as parents and stuff like that. And so they were a little bit more kind of like, the world sort of opened up. I met kids from uni high and stuff like that who like, being an artist wasn't such a crazy fucking idea,
Yeah, because that's I guess somewhat more of an older area where there's people that are,
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like, my dad grew up in Fitzroy, but that's when it was like proper, I think, in the 30s, it would be like proper, slum almost, probably like real working class. It's like, so his whole thing, I think that's even a crazy story for him to grow up there and be so entrenched in the theatre and the arts and stuff from, being like a working class kid from Fitzroy back in the day. Yeah. But yeah,
It's a similar thing. Like my family's from Port Melbourne, and say to people, "Yeah, working class from Port Melbourne." Like saying working class from Fitzroy now, those sort of things don't
Yeah,
make sense.
yeah.
But it definitely was a thing.
We're all having garage parties and stuff, so it's a bit different now.
Bit different, but yeah, man, I totally get that he didn't want you to go down that route. But you're going to do it. You're stubborn anyway. You're going to find music.
Yeah, I had to be really stubborn. I had to be kind of like, I mean, you're like that anyway when you're a teenager. It's like no one fucking knows better than me. Like I know what I'm doing. Kind of like you have that sort of real sort of, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to, if I listen to everybody, I'm not going to do this thing. Yeah. So, so that's how it jumped off from there, I guess. So leaving, like I left home at 18 or 18 and ended up just share housing. So I was share housing in, North Fitzroy and, Northcote and, around there and just being in multiple kind of bands trying to get stuff happening. So that was my whole bag for a little bit, sort of like, another really crazy thing that happened, which was the big fortuitous thing that happened to me kind of like late high school, is we had a substitute teacher and he was in a band he had at the time, which, not many people had really great home studios. Uh-huh. So he had this home studio, and because I'd already been playing drums since primary school, I was, fairly good at it. And he invited me to come and play on some recordings with his band. So, I'd go down to Fairfield where he had his studio and sit in and meet these guys that were like, in their 20s. Yeah. So a teenager, hanging out with these guys that are like, mid-20s into maybe even 30, Yeah. So it was like a real eye-opener, and it's like, that I think that really changed my brain a little bit as well. Yeah.
And they're like why are you bringing this kid? Because he can play drums.
He can fucking play drums, yeah. That's why. But so he would occasionally fuck off overseas for a trip or a holiday or whatever. And it's like, I need someone to mind my cat and my house, and the studio's in the house. So this was the education, right? This is me figuring out how to, I didn't know what a producer was, but this is me sitting in a home studio.
So he's got it fully decked out.
Yeah, it was basically we had an 8-track reel-to-reel. One track of that was sort of like SMPTE code, and SMPTE code is this kind of like time code, basically, which means that all your drum machines and your sequences can use that time code and run in sync with whatever you're recording on your reel-to-reel.
Is that state of the art then?
It was kind of like...
A lot for a home studio.
It was a lot, but by sort of 87, 88, kind of technology became affordable enough. So you have your Tascam and your TX and all that sort of stuff. So those kind of brands made it sort of affordable. I mean, it wasn't affordable for me as a teenager, but...
Like Tandy and those sort of places.
Not Tandy, Tascam was kind of these are sort of Japanese brands that were making kind of like stuff that you would get in a proper studio, but still great, but like a cheaper version.
Like a
of
Behringer
it,
version. Sort of.
Maybe that's not even a fair comparison, but but it's. Okay. I mean, I think people still use this gear now.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so like a desk and lots Junos, and sort of he'd collected these synths and 909s, drum machines, and basically left me alone in this house with this gear and just me figuring
16 or something.
Yeah, well, I was probably 17, 18 by this time, and so it was the last year of high school, so it would have been 17, and then basically just figuring stuff out. So plug a microphone in, this is it's just feeding back. I was just let's not try that again.
Trial and
just
error.
figure it out and just learn how to multi-track myself. And that was when I guess it was a massive upgrade from using ad hoc equipment to get a multi-track, to try and overdub myself doing stuff, to actually having this fucking crazy gear that I could actually, do it.
And he trusted you with it.
Well, yeah, I guess he just pulled the wool over his eyes, I guess,
So were you inviting other people over, or you were just recording there trying to learn your...
No, I was always pretty happy with my own company, so I was just there just figuring it out on my own, so just doing my thing. And I think at one point, I mean, this house was I don't know what the deal was with, I know he didn't own it, but I remember at one point we were having a band practice in one room of the house, and on the other side of the wall was where the home studio setup was, in another room. And I remember one day just knocking a hole through the wall so we could just run like microphone cables into the other room and set up a drum kit with like microphones on it and stuff. And it was like I mean, he was a good character to meet, like at that point in my life, just like, you know, you can do it.
Yeah.
Like just fuck like whatever sort of rules or whatever. Let's just like, the most important thing is to make music or to make art, you know.
Did you stay in contact with him as you got
I still do now. Yeah.
Wow,
he's
that's cool.
he lived in China for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And he's recently bought somewhere down in Tassie, so he's just like setting up a place down there and retiring down there. Yeah, still making music, still got a home studio.
That's cool.
Like, yeah, he's just sort of making music when he was in China. It was like but sort of now that he has more time and not working, it's like become more of a thing.
Yeah, man, and he must love seeing you be successful and being professional, and knowing that he had some sort of a hand in helping you and giving you a start.
I had a really good drum teacher as well when I was a little kid. That was like, he was an American guy and had moved out to Australia and gave me a lot of good sort of like tips and stuff. So that was kind of cool. I just ended up meeting like, you know, just really good people along the way.
Yeah. So then you're still got the rock sort of tip, or you trying to make more just diverse music? What do you think?
It's pretty diverse. Like, I mean, we did, so with this guy and, you know, people that we knew that played different things, we ended up making 2 cassettes of like, you know, basically co-produced these 2 records, I guess they would be. So I think this would be 89 and 90 into 91.
Yep.
So yeah, so like 2 full-length cassettes, all original music.
Did you have a name or something?
Yeah, the name of the group was Dust Up Darcy.
Okay.
He was really into boxing, this guy. So like we had songs about boxing and all kinds of shit in there. So yeah, it was a cool experience. So it was all kind of like, I don't even know what you would describe the music as, but it was sort of like
experimental.
They were songs. That wasn't, I don't know. It seemed like maybe sort of like alternative pop music, maybe.
Okay.
But with drum machines, like some of it was played drums, like beats, some of it pretty danceable, some of it not, you know.
Did you put it out in any capacity?
The first one, we kind of like, it was just a limited, I think we maybe did 200 cassettes or something.
Right.
And the second one, I think we tried to make it like more of a wider thing. It was still just like a cassette release. I remember getting a review like from Triple R or something at the time, like, you know, so that was like, I think it didn't really do anything, but
a positive review.
A positive review.
Oh, that's good.
But I think like it was more, I just see those cassette releases more or less kind of like you know, that's just my education.
Yeah.
I suppose just doing something from start to finish and then doing it again, you know, from start to finish and completing 2 things and writing songs and stuff like so.
So yeah, and that was you were it was essentially like a demo for you. You were sort of learning the process.
Because I've still got like, you know, I've got like a box of cassettes from when I was like, you know, sort of like 13 to 16, 17 of just songs and like recordings and fucking me trying to figure stuff out, you know.
Yeah. It's the best way to learn though.
Yeah, so I was always trying to write songs or, you know, yeah, that sort of thing.
So then do you go to uni after that?
No. So so basically from there, because I'm just basically like, I'm living in share houses. I'm kind of a bit of a band slut. I'm in a bunch of bands, right? And I'm trying to just the dream's happening, right? I want to be in a band. I want to get some records done. I want to, you know, the carrot and the stick, right?
And you want to kind of prove your dad that you can do it as
maybe
well.
There's a bit of that. Maybe there's a little, maybe subconsciously. But yeah, you just keep meeting people and doing stuff. And, you know, basically I just want to do stuff. So I'm saying yes to a lot of different things as long as it's sort of advancing me somehow into like you know, doing something new.
Yep.
I remember drumming with an African guy who was doing sort of Mozambique, sort of like African music and learning those sort of drums. I was in like a reggae band with all these guys from Indonesia.
Wow.
For like a couple of years. And we were like, I think we even did gigs interstate. Like we went to Sydney a couple of times, did some shows.
But it's cool to do all sorts of different drumming and different drum patterns.
Yeah.
and to
I
bring,
mean, the funny thing is, like, Vida, who you had in a couple of episodes ago, I drummed with her dad for a little bit on some shows. Like,
because that's how she got into
yeah,
this.
yeah. So Randy and Jar Roots, like, it was another like the reggae scene, the dancehall scene and stuff in Melbourne was a thing, and I kind of like played drums a bit with that.
You're crossing generations then.
Generational and just genre flipping as well. So at the same time, I was doing kind of like fucking with drum machines and synths and stuff, and also playing in this African band and playing reggae and trying to do. I also had a group with a couple of guys my own age who were trying to write songs and had like I guess it was like funk, but it was kind of like we had these weird kind of ideas about we can't use any distortion. The guitar's just got to be the clean sound out of the amp. Like it's just sort of like this real clean sort of like funk sound. I don't know. It was a weird thing. And we had this this young jazz singer. She was like the vocalist, and we'd write songs for her and stuff. I think that's when I started doing kind of like this thing of playing. Well, had this really old school drum machine when I was a kid. Like it's called a Korg Mini Pops, and it's one of these like really 70s kind of like preset drum machines where you just like hit like a fucking march or a waltz or whatever. But if you hit a few buttons at once, you get these like weird cross rhythms in it. So I always seem to have a drum machine, and like, so I guess I'm telling that so that like give you an idea of like just playing two drum machines. So I'd get the drum machine set up and get it on a rhythm and a tempo, and then play real drums over the top and record that. So you get this kind of like cool. It's like if you listen to any Sly and the Family Stone records and stuff like that, they were kind of doing that in the 60s, late 60s into the 70s.
So you're getting your swing on there naturally, but you've got
you kind of had this sort of like unnatural sounding kind of like drum machine rhythm sound going, but then you're putting real drums over the top.
Yeah.
So that band, I guess the funk band I'm describing, I had that thing going on as well, where I had a little drum machine that I'd program and then play to that. I mean, this is like early 90s now as well. So, I mean, a lot of stuff like that was existing. Yeah. Like you have like the sort of Manchester stuff that was like melding kind of like sort of loops and drum machines, and a lot of stuff from Britain actually just had like,
Stone Roses, stuff like that?
Yeah, Stone Roses and stuff like that, where people were using breakbeats as well, and not just in hip hop. So that was like a big influence as well.
Yeah. Because sampling's kicking off now.
Sampling's kicking off. People have access to samplers. The first sampler I used was a Mirage, and it had 2 seconds sampling time or whatever. It was just like had nothing.
And that was in the hard drive there.
It was like a precursor to the Ensoniq ASR10.
Okay, which is like the full keyboard.
It's like a full keyboard with floppy disks and like a tiny little like LCD screen or whatever, where you're just sort of using an encoder. So there's no waveform displays or anything like that. It's just numbers. Yeah. So if you want to truncate a sample, or for anyone listening to truncating, like if you want to trim a sample or whatever, you're just using the numbers and just like hearing it and then just deleting parts of it and just. I don't know. It's the whole thing.
But it's a totally different way. Now, from a DJing perspective, people don't even use their headphones. They just look at the waveforms. So, right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
This is when you're actually using your fucking ears.
Yeah. That for the longest time, like all of this music gear, you would just pretty much just be listening to it, because the gear wasn't up to the point where, like, even computers we would use. I think we were using an Amiga for a bit. And then I finally, I think in 94 or 5, I ended up snagging a secondhand Atari. And Ataris were really popular because they had the MIDI ports in the computer. So you could like plug your sampler or whatever you wanted into it and just sequence it. But the computers weren't like, you weren't doing hard disk recording. You weren't recording your vocals into it or anything. Those machines were at professional studios when Pro Tools was just getting there, and you could.
It's like mid-90s.
They were worth a lot of money. Those setups,
Yeah, because it's before that it was analog and sort of tape.
Yeah, it was tape. So like all this time, I mean, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out, but like you can imagine it being in a lot of bands. You're doing a lot of demos. You're going using studios. You're getting like a lot of experience recording. I really had a horrible experience in a recording studio when I was like, I think I was 14, and this older kid he was like a brother of someone who was on like fuck, what was that? It was like some sort of show on TV where kids were like entertainers or singers or whatever. Young Talent Time.
Young Talent
So
Time.
he was a brother of a kid on that show, and he wanted to cut some demos, and like he asked me to come and play drums. And I remember taking my shitty little Pearl drum kit down to this studio in South Melbourne to record this demo. And these two old, they seemed like ancient to me, these guys, these engineers that were working there. And then they just took one look at my kit. It's like, we're just going to use a drum machine. So I didn't even get to set the drums up. I just, they just programmed the drums and cut the demo and stuff. So fucking just brutal. You know?
Shut down.
Yeah.
You probably took your drum kit on the tram too.
No, I think my dad used to drive me around to like band practices and stuff, you know, when I was a kid. But so I guess we're getting into like early 90s now.
Yeah. And music's changing a lot in general.
Music's changing like at the 90s were like just a crazy period of all kinds of stuff going on. So
all of a sudden the music, I'm obviously younger, but at that time I started to pay attention to music. All of a sudden the music that you're hearing on the radio is coming from every different direction. It's not just what the 80s was with kind of its pop. You're kind of
Yeah, but like, I mean, the thing that people forget about the 80s, because I don't really listen to much pop music. That wasn't my bag, and I'm sure a lot of people like this as well. Like, you know, there are a lot of alternative things happening in the 80s that weren't fucking Wham or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you had Sonic Youth and like all kinds of stuff, like, you know, Brian Eno, like you had a gamut of stuff that was not commercial music, but you could still get into it, you know?
For sure. That's a bit of a generational thing though, because I guess from my perspective,
I'm
young.
But it's true. Like when people bring up the 80s, it's commercial music.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, whatever was the popular thing of the day. But I think they forget that like so much great, like, you know, you had the punk scene in the 80s, like the sort of no wave stuff that was happening in the 80s, kind of like the ambient music, like you had hip hop, you got all these things, you know, dub music, like dancehall music. Like there's so much stuff there that's not, you know, Rick Astley or whatever. You know what I mean?
It's true. But it's the same when people think of the 90s, they think of the Spice Girls and that sort of shit.
Yeah,
it's like whatever the popular shit was,
I guess.
that's what people
that
sort of
is
revert
true.
back to.
I think it's just good to remind people that there's other stuff.
I think it's definitely a generational thing, because at that time you're in your teens and you're, you know, thinking about, you're able to acquire your own music.
Yeah.
When people have, like, I'm like 10 years younger and a bit.
Yeah.
We're just listening to what we're exposed to, because we don't have the, you know.
Well, I remember just like as a kid, like tapes were the king, you know, like that's how music got passed around. I remember getting tapes and just whatever it was, you just like, even buying records, you know, back in the day, like you might get a hint that you like something, you'd have to buy it, and then you take it home and you might not even like it.
So they wouldn't let
first
you play it first?
Well, I mean, I just remember like buying something because I thought it was cool or whatever and taking it home and thinking it was okay. But then sometimes those records became your favorite shit. I don't know if that happens much now, because it's like it's more of an instantaneous world. Like if you don't like something in the first 5 seconds, you might not listen to it again.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. If you've spent $15 on a record and you don't like it, you'll kind of force yourself to like it because you just spent $15
I mean,
on a record.
I guess that's it. I mean, there's a lot of forcing yourself to like it, but I feel like I discovered a lot of great music just through persistence, you know?
Yeah. And
like you might not get something difficult right away. Like, you know, there's so much music like that where it can take a bit of effort, you know, on your listening
to understand it,
to appreciate it, yeah.
And I guess from what you go into doing, having that stable of records helps, because all that stuff's samples sitting there ready to be picked
that's
up.
true. Yeah.
So then you start to. You're not going to uni now at all. You're still just doing the band thing.
I'm in bands. I'm sharehousing still. I've moved to. I end up getting into this group with these guys. One of them's a writer he was writing for Inside Sport or something like that. So and he's trying to write novels and shit. And he's got a band, and we have a rehearsal space above Leo's Spaghetti Bar in St Kilda.
Yeah.
I end up moving down to St Kilda. I get a spot right across on the Esplanade, right across from Luna Park, basically in one of those, like on the ground floor apartment with the stoop right out the front, which is
the ones,
So
now that's like $4 million.
I mean, yeah. So we're just like these dead shit musicians, and we're affording this like place, you know. And in that apartment block, there were like a few actors and stuff, that went on to have, acting careers, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'm in this band and we end up getting, still recording stuff in these like either professional studios doing demos or trying to get things happening. And we end up getting this guy, Jeff Urbacher, who was like recording, I think, for, I don't know if you remember a band called Custard.
Yeah,
but, these are all Brisbane guys. So like
First
they had
gig
these.
I ever went to,
Yeah,
Custard
right.
opened up for.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like.
And I think he's the voice of the Bluey character now. Of
Oh,
the Bluey
is it?
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, right,
The
okay.
dude, it's the main dude from Custard is the voice for Bluey's dad, I think.
Yeah, right.
I think.
So him and this other cat, Joe Malone, who builds audio gear now.
Yeah.
They were kind of like friends of these guys who were playing. They were all in. So I think they were sort of like in these sort of like post-punk new wave bands in Brisbane, and they'd moved to Melbourne. This is like so in the early '90s. They were trying to get some other band happening. Yeah. And he came down and set up like a mobile recording studio in this apartment that was above Leo's Spaghetti Bar, and we ended up cutting some songs there. And off the back of that, ended up, going and getting some shows up in Brisbane. So like, yeah, all this time I'm playing.
It's like 92, 93 now?
92, 93. I think 93, we did some video clips to like 16mm film and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And Fitzroy Street was very different back then.
It was very different, yeah.
That exact time, one of my best mates, his family owned that newsagent a few doors down. So we spent a lot of time at that news agency there.
Okay, yeah,
right,
yeah.
A few doors down from Lee. Oh, it was the next block, but yeah. Oh, Leo's is further this way. Yeah, it was down towards the corner of Grey Street.
Yeah,
but
right.
it was Fitzroy Street was a wild place in the early 90s.
Man, it just became my world for a few years. Just St Kilda and doing gigs at the SB and the old Prince. So like the Prince of Wales Hotel had this sidebar. I don't think it's there anymore.
It became Ming Bar sort of on the side. Yeah.
So it's like upstairs. Yeah, across from like the main band room now.
Yep.
We used to have like booths in there, and we were playing in there a little bit. Just all over, basically, kind of like even So, don't know where I'm going with this, but
I was just trying to paint a picture that St Kilda and Fitzroy Street, especially Grey Street, Esplanade, it was just a different. In the 90s, it was just a different place.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like so much is going on. Like in this time period from 1990, 93, 94, there's like shitloads going on. Yeah. I could probably write a book. I don't know. There's like just so many things happening, so many people. It feels like it's sort of like a real, like, because it's affordable down there at this point in the early 90s, it's like, a bit of crime anywhere like that before it's gentrified. Yeah, more than a bit, but like it makes it affordable for artists to live there, right? So you have like a really artistic kind of like community down there of people that are either writers or they're trying to make films or people doing music, and you're running into these people all the time.
Yeah. And that's becomes a creative arts hub.
Yeah.
Until shit gets too expensive.
Until everyone gets kicked out and they move somewhere else.
And eventually they all sort of tend to go north side. They went to Collingwood, Fitzroy, get pushed out further.
Yeah.
Fucking Reservoir or wherever.
Yeah, right. There's like way out. This keeps it. We'll be in the country soon enough.
Yeah, I think that's already happening. They're going to Castlemaine.
Castlemaine, yeah, that's been there for a while now.
Yeah. But so from your musical journey, you're hanging around with dudes who are recording, like Custard there, for lack of a better term, indie rock kind of stuff.
Yeah, but simultaneously, I'm sort of borrowing 4-track reel-to-reel recorders and using drum machines and still trying to make... I mean, they're beats, but I don't know what a beat is. I'm just making kind of like, here's my wacky fucking, keyboard drum machine beat using this... I was always like borrowing gear and like kind of getting hand-me-downs of like sound modules and
but people
sequences
knew
and
what
stuff.
Doing, so they're like, yeah.
I was just hungry to make shit.
Yeah.
And I think by this time, I'm trying to figure out the series of events happened. So I met a bass player through the reggae stuff that I was doing who knew this other guy, a guitarist that was in... there was a band called The Bachelors from Prague in the early 90s. They kind of like...
I remember seeing that gig poster.
Yeah, they used to be on TV and stuff a lot. Anyway, so the guitarist from that band had started another group with this guy who had just moved to Australia from LA, and he was kind of like a painter, rapper kind of guy. And he wanted to make... He was sort of like doing rapping in this kind of like live band thing, but he wanted to make stuff that was more sort of like more hip hop, I guess, more rap music. This was sort of like jazzy, kind of like, you got to remember there's so much like genres of music floating around. So you have like stuff like acid jazz and stuff. So people are like pretty into like having sort of jazzy, funky sort of stuff, and then
Chili
having
Peppers
some
is happening at that time, which is
Chili
popular.
Peppers is in a different
vibe.
vibe completely. This is like, you know, stuff like bands like far out, man, like Corduroy
Okay,
and Vibraphonic, and you got sort of maybe early DJ Crush, like stuff like this is sort of happening where it's like jazz and hip hop really melding. So you have jazz bands and funk bands, mainly from Britain and Europe.
Yeah, so it's the early trip hop sort of almost.
Trip hop's sort of like just starting. I remember there was around this time you have early sort of Moax compilations and a few early, like I picked up a few sort of early Moax 12 inches, and that's the shit that I really loved, like, because a lot of it was instrumental, right? And I wasn't really aware at this point of like too much Australian rap anyway. It was more just kind of like, I met this guy, Mike, he's like, you know, to me, like, he was like a black American rapper. So it seemed like, oh yeah, this seems legit. This is the guy, right? So we ended up sort of like share housing this flat in St Kilda, and I just start sort of like, I borrow a sampler and we just start making beats, which is kind of like a continuation from what I was doing, trying to like do it with sort of real drums and stuff, which I still do actually. I'm still sampling into the sampler of my real kit. I mean, yeah, it's just all kinds of, it's everything all at once, right? But it just goes into like top gear because I feel like I found my thing.
Yeah. And someone whose vocals you feel
yeah,
like
so he's
cool.
because he's really pushing for this thing, and I'm maybe like trying out so much stuff. It sort of like gives me more of a focused direction, and I've also like figured, because I've had all these years of fucking around in studios. Turns out I'm not bad at it, like collaging and putting sounds together and stuff.
Is he musically minded besides the lyrics? Is he making music as well, or he's just doing the vocals? And
He's just doing the vocals, but he's sort of like kind of very artistic minded. He's always painting. He comes from like graffiti culture, but more like I guess like a painterly angle of it. Also just skating and stuff as well. So there's all these things mixing together. And yeah, he's sort of introducing me to more sort of DJs, and I'm sort of getting more into like, I guess like all the genres of music that I'm into are now taking a backseat. Sort of 94 into 95, I'm just like really focused on sampling and putting beats together.
Still with that same machine that only could do 2 seconds of sample?
No, this is like, now I've met this guy who is a producer. Like, you would know his name from doing productions on some early Peg stuff and stuff. So I met this kid, Derm. He owns an ASR 10, and it turns out he just wants to, like, I have these long borrows of this ASR 10. It's like a, you know, semi-permanent loan sometimes, like in between, you know, us getting together for jams and stuff. So it's kind of like, while I have it, I just smash out as much as I can. And when I don't have it, I use my old sequences and stuff and just record stuff anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I have this ASR 10 and I'm just smashing out beats. The only thing I can record them onto is cassette though. So we have all of our stuff on cassette.
So no DAT tapes or anything. So they're literally onto just tape.
Yeah, I just couldn't afford to have a DAT recorder. So I sometimes hire one to like dump a bunch of beats onto. There was a few places where you could just like hire pieces of gear. And so I just get one for a weekend and just dump all of my beats onto a DAT tape. Yeah. And a lot of shit's happening. So we're starting to get gigs at like some festivals and some supports and stuff. So there was a festival thing for like Beats Music, which was, I remember doing it. I think it was, I'm going to say it's 94.
Yep.
And it's called Vibes on a Summer's Day. And they had DJ Crush came out. I think even Shadow might have come out for that. It was just all these early like Moax sort of things melded with DJs from Melbourne. Like I think it did 3 cities.
Yeah. Was it at the Music Bowl?
this was at the Palace.
Oh, yep.
Went before that burnt down or whatever. Yeah, so like on the St Kilda foreshore there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did that gig, and then that led on to heaps of other stuff. I remember playing like, I think we would have played like the Nightcat back then when that was a thing, and like just man, we're just like playing around, doing stuff with this sort of like live raps. I would do pretty much what I still do now, whereas I'd make beats, sort of take a majority of the drums out, and then play that back, and then play real drums over the top, and then have someone rap over it. And then we had some live samples and some guitar as well.
So like someone with like an MPC doing the live sound?
We had the ASR-10, so we just used the ASR-10. And then I think Derm was also using I had like an old sort of Hammond-y kind of like organ as well, which we'd use.
Did people get it?
You know what it was? It was like, well, the vast majority of Australia didn't get it because it was a rock fucking country, right? Everyone's just into like, I think, grunge would have been just starting up, and we were doing the opposite of all that sort of stuff. He was like, Mike was getting, we were getting a lot of music from America through his contacts there. So we were getting like, we just got everything.
They just ship your record.
We would just get CDs like in the mail. So we were getting like,
yeah.
Wu-Tang and all sorts of stuff, like 93 to 94, 95, we would just get stuff all the time. Or if not that, cassettes. And we'd get like his friends would also send us their beat tapes from LA and stuff. So I could hear what other dudes were doing, on an underground level. Yeah.
And you could sample them, I guess?
No, it just give me like a yardstick of like, what's happening. Like I know what the stuff, the rap music that I'm hearing on record sounding, but this is also what is being produced in fucking some garage in Pasadena or whatever, Yeah.
And their influences are different. And
it's just like, this is cool. Like, I don't know much about Nat Adderley or whatever, but I'll go dig that jazz record and like, that's a cool sound or blah, blah. And
so the whole time you're still digging, you're still looking for samples of records?
Yeah, like records, it was kind of like St Kilda back then. There was this thing where I think people were offloading their vinyl.
Dixon's was on...
Yeah, not even that, but there was like cafes where like you'd find at the back of a cafe, there'd just be like someone would have their records there, and it'd be like, $5 for like a jazz record or whatever. And I found some crazy shit doing that, just like always having an eye out for something to sample. And I think like maybe this is the same for a lot of people. You start digging to rinse shit. Basically, you're buying records because you might be able to get a break off of it or a sound or something to sample. And what happens is you start actually liking and digging all this different music, you know what I mean? It becomes kind of like your palette of taste just gets wider because you're just, into all this. Listening to all this other.
Forcing yourself to like it.
Yeah, forcing yourself to like stuff. But so it was a bit of that. And I think into like 95, we started to get a few supports. This might even be into 95, we decided to we needed to make a proper recording, so we booked time at this studio in Fitzroy. And we couldn't afford to buy the reel. So it was like a 16 track or whatever it was. We couldn't afford to buy the reel, but they would do us a price on a bunch of days of recording if we didn't keep the reel. So
how do you take it then?
So basically what it was is we go in there, I have all my sequences done, I have all my beats made, I do some live drops and stuff while we're recording to tape. So my beats are going straight to 2 tracks of tape, and then we're doing overdubs. And the main overdub is the main reason we're going there, so we can do a great vocal recording. So we have a nice mic, we go into tape, blah, blah, blah. And then we do I think we do an afternoon of we record 12 songs, and we mix them all in half a day.
Yeah, because studio time's expensive.
Yeah. And then we we put them to DAT. And then from there we get some guy who we get recommended who's cheap for mastering to just do a master for us, which was pretty terrible, but it's what we could afford.
It's not, and you weren't thinking about mastering then, or you just didn't have?
No, I didn't have the means. I didn't have a computer that I couldn't do hard disk recording or anything. I still had the Atari, and I was using that to do sequencing, so I could sequence whole songs from start to finish and have different things being sequenced.
Soon computing, so that's really sort of levels up
the cool thing about the ASR is that Derm had maxed out the RAM in it. So
That was cool.
that was really cool because like without a multi-track recorder when we're making the beats, I could get someone to come play, say, a trumpet solo, sample it, and then just at that part of the beat where I wanted the trumpet solo to happen, just hold down that key because I think it had 2 minutes or something, depending on how the bit rate, and also if you wanted stereo effects and stuff. So
Okay.
it was the ASR 10 was maxed out for RAM. So
And that opened up the possibilities.
yeah, so I mean, you'd have to save to like, you know, you'd be putting like 10 floppy disks of like sounds and stuff into it.
I get
But
it now.
yeah, you could.
Because the RAM was using you had to basically boot it like a boot disk.
Yeah,
sort
it
of
was.
thing.
Yeah, so you basically hold whatever the memory was in it at the time. You could. That's what your sampling capability was, right?
Yeah.
So you could have like someone sing the hook and have it be a sample. I remember doing crazy shit. Like a friend of mine had some. These Japanese students came down that she was looking after and was like, "Oh, can you say stuff in Japanese?" and putting that all over the record and sampling that up, and just like people coming in and playing different pieces of music, you know, instrumentation, and just recording snippets of that and just everything. We recorded like the sound of the tram in on the Esplanade going past for part of the record, and just all kinds of we're just like I was sampling everything. I just had like a couple of mics and was just like, you know, going hard, as they say.
Yeah, well, that's it. Because it changed quickly from, you know, just like records that you could grab a drum loop from. It's like we can sample anything, and then all of a sudden we're making original.
Well, I don't
stuff
think it even like a, you know, that wasn't like a new revelation. I think I was always doing that. Like it was, I mean, this records became kind of like, oh, you're only supposed to record from records. Well, I don't know, because I'm just sampling everything anyway, so I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
But like I will. There's a lot of cool shit on records, so I will do that the majority. But if there's something cool on a VHS cassette in a movie that I like, I'm sampling the fuck out of that as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why hold yourself back?
Yeah.
So so we did that recording, and then we made a cassette and a CD, and then we put those in like, you know, Central Station. We traveled up to Sydney and did a show up there. Put it in Central Station up there, and just I think Rocking Horse, or we distributed it to basically the capital cities, and that was our little kickoff. And from that CD, this is early '96 now. I think we put it out in '95, so it must be '95 into '96. We started getting better supports. So we did a support for Tricky when he came out at the Prince of Wales.
That's the kind of shit that you loved as well.
Yeah, so it was like right in that. Well, this is the thing. I don't think I might be speaking out of term here, but like I think to like the promoter's ear, we were just one of the few acts probably in Melbourne that could maybe be a good fit for some of this stuff.
Yep.
Because there wasn't heaps of it around.
Yeah.
Not like there is now. You know, it's
And
like
around the corner.
It was not. It was not the dominant music. You know?
Yeah.
So if there's like a band that's doing sampled sort of like live shit with an American MC, yeah, fuck, let's just book that. You know what I mean? I'd like to think we were kind of cool as well, but maybe it was also to do with like, you know, what we were doing and who we were.
And if you've got the nous and the determination to put out a CD, then that shows that you mean business. As well.
Oh, it helped a lot. It helped a lot as far as like, you know, you're kind of like, I guess, sort of serious, and I'm leaving out a lot of shit. I think like
we'll go into it if you want, man. We've got all the time in the world.
We were always making dumb decisions.
Okay.
So like
because of your naivety and
that, and
youthfulness?
also, you know, you got to remember when you sort of like, everyone just has their own sort of like hubris or whatever. You know, you think you're the shit. Nothing's, you know, no one's as good as us. Everyone goes through this period, and like
sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. Like. We actually had a couple of like record deals offered to us, but we were like, it's not enough money. Like we could probably get a better deal than that, not knowing that it was like, that's probably a pretty good deal for where we were at.
Like an advancement sort of scenario.
Yeah,
to record it.
I think for that CD, we had like an offer from Mushroom to like do that record, and we're like, we'll just do it ourselves. Like fucking idiots, right? So we ended up just self-distributing that.
You could have had Gadinsky behind you, man.
Could have had a little bit of anything would have been great. But I think also like I would just also go with the flow a little bit. Like if Mike or, you know, another member of the band were just like against something, I'd just go with it. thinking maybe this is the best thing to do.
Okay. So you're in the back. Obviously, you're instrumental in the whole band, but when it comes to decisions, you're letting them sort of take the
I just
reins?
have my trust is like, I think I had a lot of trust in Mike to like make the right decision as well. I'm not throwing him under the bus completely because I was sort of definitely going along with it.
Yeah.
But like, that's just one example. But we're doing stuff like, what other things we were doing? We had like when DJ Shadow came out to play with James Lavelle, and they had a Money Mark did a solo performance, and we did that support. A whole bunch of cool shit like that around 96. And I remember the Beastie Boys came down, asked if they can jump on my kit for the Money Mark show, and like did that, met those guys. Like this is like,
What venue is that at?
this was at, I think it's where the Nova Cinema is now, but it was called Badinsky's.
Okay.
So I think the gig was meant to be at the Collingwood Town Hall, but they changed it last minute to this other venue. That's just like I guess a slice of like the stuff that's going on. I think we went on. I'm leaving out a couple of cool other like things, but we went on ABC Recovery TV.
Yeah.
You remember that?
It was in Elwood, Elstonwick there.
Elstonwick, yeah, the ABC studios. It was like a morning show, like
Dylan Lewis.
Dylan Lewis, yeah. So like he he got us on. We did like 3 songs across the whole show, so it was pretty cool. Yeah. And then at the last song, he wanted to get up and rap with us or whatever.
Did he?
Which we kind of did.
Is there footage of that out there?
There is footage somewhere. This is when I was rapping as well. So like for some songs, I would like play drums on and make the beats, and then others I'd just leave the drums in, let the beat run, and then go out front and then exchange raps with Mike. We also had a singer, this guy from the UK, Dell, who kind of like sounded like to me, sort of sounded like a male Nina Simone somehow. Okay. Like cool voice. So we had him on hooks and stuff.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine Matt because she's got that sort of.
I mean, it's just like a
soulful.
He was just like he was into like sort of UK soul and stuff. So there is footage somewhere. I mean, I hope no one sees it because it's got me rapping on it. I don't think I was.
How long after that did you hang the mic up and stop rapping?
I think I just was like willing to try anything. Well, I was encouraged by Mike to rap because I would just do it out of fun, just freestyle and stuff. It's like, man, you should just like record some shit. Yeah. And I do believe I had a bit of a twang, so it would have had a bit of an American accent going on. Sort of half and half, I think.
Have you met, like, for lack of a better term, the hip-hop sort of heads yet?
Yeah. Oh, actually, I missed out. Like, we did a support in early 95, late 94 for Spearhead when they came out. Yeah. And we did, like, Adelaide and Melbourne. And for that, I'd heard about this guy in Richmond who had, like, he had an Ensoniq EPS 16 Plus, which is very similar to the ASR 10, and he had a DAT recorder, which was Prowler. So I ended up going to his place, which was above his dad's restaurant, and hooking up with them just to kind of like get some beats recorded and stuff. Yep. So that's the first time I met those guys.
And that, when you say those guys, Trem's there as well, or who?
I think that time it was Prowler and maybe Menace, Dean. I can't remember if Mary was there. But yeah, this other thing that happened around that time is we started a little club night in Smith Street, Collingwood, which was this place called Africa Bar. And this guy let us kind of like use his club. Like he had an upstairs part. Yep. And we got DJs like Johnny Topper, who I think is still on Triple R, and like, we're just like booking DJs and also playing and inviting other MCs around to get up. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot there's a lot happening in this period, right? We're doing a lot of things, trying to basically like, there's that thing which I'm sure people talked about where there wasn't really like, or very sparse on like hip hop nights and stuff like that. So there wasn't really a thing. So you would kind of like go to like Africa Bar was a restaurant, but we turned it into a club. We were actually looking for a Chinese restaurant because we thought it'd be cool because we could do like finger food. So we thought it might be a good look. Yeah. It's crazy ideas, right? But I mean, yeah, that's what made it kind of cool, I guess. Yeah. But so you just basically go to a pub or whatever, and whatever their shit night was where no one was coming, they'd give you that night to do like rap music. Yeah. So a lot of that was happening as well.
And the stigma hadn't come in yet that these dudes might fuck your venue up?
I don't remember a lot of that.
Okay.
Like maybe I was just oblivious to it, you know. Yeah. But it could have been a thing. I feel like that was maybe later. Yeah. It feels like a late 90s, early 2000 thing when we started to get a bit hectic on that. So people just trashing the bathroom and stuff.
Yeah. So you meet Prowler, and then I guess hip hop has been being made, but it's very underground. Well, you're not even privy to it at this stage.
Well, I only through like, you know, trips to Sydney and stuff and meeting other people, and it's like, okay, so this guy's got a label, and like we got like an offer to do like a track on this label, Creative Vibes, who are out of Sydney. We did a track on one of their compilations. So there's all this stuff happening, and I'm, you know, through this 1, 2, 3 year period becoming super aware of all this other stuff happening, and you're just running into people and, you know, crossing paths. I think even for that club night that we had at Africa Bar, Prowler I remember going there for this meeting, and Prowler rocked up with somebody else because they wanted to have a night there as well. And we ended up just like, we ended up doing it. And I think it ended up offering us like, oh man, if you want to come and DJ at our night, you can if you want.
But how does an African restaurant end up on both your radars?
I don't know. I think because it just had like, you would just look for anywhere with a setup, because obviously we weren't lugging in PAs and stuff, right? So if you had like a sound system in a back room, it's like, fuck, let's just do something in there. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was that kind of thing of just looking for somewhere that wasn't a rock venue, that was kind of something cool.
Open-minded. Yeah,
open-minded. And during this time, we were doing shows at like, I think the Lounge in Swanston Street was a thing. I remember seeing Gil Scott-Heron there in like 95 or something. So that was cool.
Had a really late license too.
Yeah, hung out with him and smoked a joint upstairs. It was pretty cool. Yeah. But so just meeting all these people and doing these supports and like really, it's just it was a cool time.
So when you meet Prowler, you then start to think, all right, can I do more of this hip hop production, or are you still just on the band?
I thought I was already doing hip hop production, but
you didn't know what you didn't know that you were though.
No, I knew I was. So, yeah, we were. Yeah, we were.
Just with the band influence though.
Yeah, I mean I guess for our live stuff, I'd play drums live and have some keys and stuff. I mean, it was sort of like a half band. You know what I mean?
You would call what would you call it, live?
Well, we do shows also where I just play the backing tracks and play drums over it and just have mic rap. So it's basically a 2-piece, sometimes a 3-piece. So it wasn't like a band, I guess. You know, it was pretty much like what, you know, me and Muff would do years later.
Yeah.
That sort of setup. So, you know, it's something that by the time I got to there, I was already kind of like doing that stuff years before.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously I was aware I was making beats and making hip hop.
But you said for a while you didn't know you were making beats.
Oh yeah, this is in the early 90s. Yeah, in the early 90s.
Mid-90s, you know exactly what you're
doing. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you do that, and what happens with that group? Inevitably, you turn down some offers from Gadinsky and.
Yeah, we had this thing. Well, it got to the point where like we were going along for a bit. I remember we got kicked out of our apartment in. I'm going to say early 97. We're looking at, I think we had an offer from Roadrunner Records to do a 3-album deal.
And that's not an Australian label.
No, but they had an office here at the same building that Shock were run out of in Northcote. So we got an offer to do a 3-album deal with them, and that was like the home of Sepultura and stuff. It's like, what the fuck?
At the biggest time of those guys. Sort of.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it would have been a cool thing, but we fucked that up somehow.
So like you're talking about going to actual meetings with record dudes.
Yeah.
Contracts, and you're like, nah.
Yeah. It sounds like, I hate to say it, but yeah, that's how it kind of worked.
Just because you were just,
I think we did this dumbass thing where we're like, they offered us some money for the first record, and then it was like, you know, provisos for the next 2 records. And being arrogant and fuckheads that we were, we thought, well, if they're going to offer us this money, we should just get them to give us this shit up front. And then we can buy all this gear and have our own studio. And then we can make as many fucking records as we want.
But you still would have to give them 3.
Yeah.
But then you've got.
I think they heard our counter offer and went, "You guys are fucking crazy. There's no way we're doing this."
Just too far apart.
It's just like, yeah, it's like not going to work. So that was just a missed opportunity. So we're entering into 97 now, and I move into, where did I go from here? I move into like a warehouse in the CBD.
Yeah.
And there I meet some guys from VCA who were studying like jazz and improv. I reconnect with Prowler. Mike doesn't really want to do shows. I think the last round of stuff we did was that we had a residency at the Nightcat. And I remember halfway through this residency, I don't think he really wanted to do it. So I ended up just like, I got the microphone and on the drum kit, just wanted to keep these gigs going. So I ended up just doing his raps and drumming. Because I do a bit of that as well.
A bit of Phil Collins
This
stuff.
is when I was still like rapping, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd rap and play drums and just do this, and this sort of like run of gigs. I think we did one more show at somewhere in Carlton some night we had on where everyone just got super stoned and it was a fucking shit show.
Is rapping while you're playing drums, like I'm guessing, you've got to get your breathing patterns. It would be tough, wouldn't it? Or is it just rhythmic?
Honestly, don't remember, but it seemed pretty easy at the time. I don't know if I'd be able to do it now, but it seemed like I'll just do it, you know.
Yeah. Because I'm guessing the drum patterns you're playing are different to the rhyme patterns, and then I don't know. That just sounds like confusing to me, but I'm not a fucking.
Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of like
happen.
it made it happen. Yeah, it just it seemed okay at the time. I don't know who that guy was, but yeah, it seemed fine. And so that sort of fizzled out. That was the Macronauts anyway. That was that group. That kind of fizzled out. And then I ended up doing these sort of jams with these VCA guys where me and Prowler would be the kind of like the scum street kind of like hip hop dudes, and they would be the kind of like VCA jazz guys sort of doing their solos and stuff. And we would add the hard beats and the scratching into it.
And it was like a yin and yang.
Yeah, pretty much this thing. So we were playing around the city. I feel like I'm leaving a lot of things out there, but so that's sort of like how that sort of like, that's how me and Prowler reconnected through this. I think he came down, I think I was already doing this thing, and he came down one night to this place, this bar we were doing this show at, and he suggested he would like to do cuts on it live. And we'd already connected already, so we kind of knew of each other.
Yeah. And he had all the equipment, and you've got equipment as well, but he's got a computer at this stage, which is
he's got a hard disk recorder, because at the same time as I'm doing this stuff, we're still doing a few compilations, and I think this is the first time I do I put out something just as myself. Was on this compilation, a Brisbane compilation of Australian hip hop, and it had some instrumental stuff on it. I think it had maybe Jigsaw Jeff, had Brad Strutt on it, some early Brad Strutt track, Resin Dogs, a bunch of things on there. Yep. And I had an instrumental on there, and I think Prowls did the cuts on it.
What was the record called?
It was on the 4-Element Effect.
Okay. That makes sense, yeah.
Yep. It does what it says on the lid, I guess.
Yeah.
So it was that. And this is just all these little opportunities popping up now and then to do, a track here on a compilation or whatever it was, just to get music. Music seemed really hard to put out in the 90s. It seemed like it cost a lot of money, and I don't know.
Because the label still had the stronghold.
It just seemed difficult. And no, I don't think there was a few Oz rap compilations around, but they were just really, just here and there. You know what I mean? And everyone was interested in bands. Everyone's interested in guitars. Yeah. That was the sound of the day. So that's what it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Silverchair and Big.
That's the stuff that's happening in Australia, right? So all this other dance music adjacent and rap and hip hop and anything under that umbrella is sort of other music,
Yeah. Which is still getting a little bit of a run on little things like, like you said, recovery and rage. And
Yeah, I
stuff
mean,
like
there
that,
are
but not
things.
huge,
Yeah, not huge. Yeah, so yeah. Anyway, so that's how that was,
So,
and then
yeah.
so at the end of like I think so 98 into 99. This is when Madlock happened as well. So out of that sort of like other band, the sax player from that band ended up just playing bass. I think he finished VCA on saxophone as his main instrument, and then realized that all the music that he loved, saxophone was like the least to do with it, kind of thing. So it was all bass music. Bass and drums were king in that world, right?
Saxophone went missing for quite a
Saxophone wasn't a thing. I don't know. So he ended up playing bass and ended up being like a great bass player. And then Derm came back into the fold to play live samples, and we ended up playing gigs as Madlock. And I was in the warehouse in the city and had this sort of like, like I always did, had a bunch of equipment floating around and ended up making the recordings. I remember having this little mixing desk and the drums all mic'd up and everything, and recording it in that warehouse. And that's one of the tracks from that recording ended up on Rock the City compilation. And also Prowler was aware that I was just in my room making beats, basically just sampling shit, and just he didn't know what I was going to do with any of it. But he offered to have one of my instrumentals on that Rock the City thing. So that cemented again this whole idea of me as a solo artist.
Yeah.
Or, I could just do this thing. I didn't need to be just forget this whole idea of being in a band.
Yeah, you can
or
just
like
do
having
you.
other people to like drive this thing, maybe to, because you got to think this is like a decade now or longer of like things coming together and just falling apart, things coming together, falling apart. Like, it's just like, fuck, you're always reliant on 3, 4, 5 other people pulling in the same direction, and more often than not, they're not pulling in the same direction. So what's the most reliable thing is just you doing it. So that was kind of like the start of that, I guess.
With the instrumental that they put on the album, was there any talk of people rapping on it, or you were just like, no, I just want it to be an instrumental?
I think probably came from both of us. It was just going to be an instrumental.
Yeah.
Because I think, because like some of my favorite shit was, I'd buy hip hop 12s and just listen to the instrumental or whatever. It wasn't like and also like stuff like Moax, it's just like a decade in of Moax as well. So, or whatever, that maybe that period of time. So the DJ Shadows and people like that were not, a far off idea. That was like a thing that you could do. You could be a producer and just make kind of like music landscapes, blah, 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 beats, and have that be the thing.
Yeah. And I guess from that sort of record perspective, anyone who gets G'd up listening to the rappers, then they've got an instrumental track there where they can rap in
Yeah,
the
well,
room.
that happened. That actually bit me in the ass quite a few times, because you'd put out instrumental records, and then like every fucking gutter rapper under the sun would just have stuff coming out with your beats on it. It's like,
It's flattering
it's
to an
fine.
extent.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think you understand the gamut of like the good and the bad.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
some of it was flattering. I
Yeah.
think later on, like, you get dudes from different countries sending you stuff over your own shit. It was really cool. Actually, it was really cool. I don't know why I'm being such a dickhead about it, but it was kind of cool.
It's hard when people, and you can't knock them for just because they're looking for something, they don't have the means to find their own beats, and you know what I mean. That's what they do.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things with me and Dielectrics connecting, is that like a 12-inch that I'd done, that I'd remixed one of my own instrumentals. He had written a whole song to it, and then when I, met him or whatever, he did the whole song to this instrument. I was like, oh, holy shit, this guy really likes, my production. You know what I mean?
Did you let him
sort of
have
flattering? I think we did use it for something. I think it was like a hidden track on something later.
Hidden track. That's something that
You don't have that anymore. Yeah.
It's the only time they ever existed was CDs, because you didn't have them on tapes, you didn't have them on records.
Yeah. It was just like there were tracks that existed before Zero, and then
Yeah.
You'd leave a gap and then have
Yeah.
a track or whatever.
Yeah, the before zeros one I can't even really get my head around, but they used to be ones.
So annoying.
But the ones that you'd let it play for like 5 minutes, and then there was a
And
track
then there was not
on
the
last
song.
track.
Yeah.
Some kids would be watching this going, "What are
It's
you
kind of,
talking about?"
yeah, I think the thinking behind that was like this. It's either this song's not quite good enough to be in the body of work, or it's sort of like somehow separate, or
No, it's an Easter egg, so people go,
Maybe,
"Have
yeah.
you heard that?" Fucking...
I still think you would put it there because you didn't. It's not part of the legit album. Maybe it's something you'd put on a B-side or an extra track on a 12-inch or something.
There you go. It's a CD B-side.
It's a CD B-side that exists. Yeah.
We just invented it. All right. So you're working with So
This is like this is me just starting to figure I could release stuff as a solo artist. I mean, I'm a solo artist anyway. I don't know why I keep saying solo artist, but just as like a one person thing.
Yeah.
Producer, I guess, and then also me starting to think like maybe I could do beats for other people. I don't have to be the beat maker in the crew and just do it for people that are I could freelance a little bit. And also Madlock is doing a thing now as well, and at this time I reconnect with Rusiel, who's like a dancehall rapper who I met years earlier in the reggae stuff. Like in that scene, he was sort of like a young kid at that point, just like doing dancehall, like toasting and ragga shit. And so he ends up being kind of like a sort of like a vocalist for the Madlock thing. And then me and him start working on a dancehall record, basically, because I have that history.
You've got a history with everything.
I got history with everything.
You can make it work.
True. I could make it work.
Yeah.
And then sort of like, so through doing Rock the City, Theo Prowler is kind of like, let's just do more shit. So, because I think Jace at this point is taking a back seat because he's sort of got New Breed, I think, going on, which is funny. Like, I did play a few shows with New Breed as well.
I've got the CD up there, man. I found
think
it the other day.
in 2000 or 2001, I did one of the first Falls festivals with them on drums for New Breed.
One of the first Falls festivals?
I don't think it would have been. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone knows the Falls festival history more than me.
So you reckon that's like late 90, no, 2001?
I think 2000, yeah, I think it would have been. Yeah. It was before I put my first solo record out, so I think I'm going to say 2000. Yeah.
See, when you guys were saying no to majors, Jace is like, yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He's smart, yeah. So, but like I always loved that. I mean, I grew up doing DIY shit, underground stuff. That was my whole bag. I just loved that whole. Every time there was something like someone telling you how to do it or this is how we're going to package it or whatever, it's like I just would. Still in that age where I was rejecting stuff like that.
Who knows how it would have turned out? Right? You could have done it, and
then who the fuck knows?
It
would have been
different direction.
Yeah, could have been completely different. Yeah. Who knows? Like no regrets, right? So so we start working on Lone Wolf, Prowler's record Lone Wolf, and my solo record simultaneously, and we've both moved to computers to record. This is 99 into 2000. So, and I think I was a little bit more up on using the software. So I was kind of like teaching Prowler all the shortcuts and getting faster and stuff and doing stuff. But we were basically like, at this point I'm in Abbotsford and he's in Richmond. So basically like just sort of seeing each other all the time. Yeah. And just making music and recording shit. We're both figuring out Photoshop, so we're basically like working on his record cover, working on my record cover. This is like the DIY shit. None of us thought to like, hey, we know a lot of artists. Maybe someone can do like, well, he's an artist, I guess, but like we're not like graphic designers. Yeah. But I guess another thing to remember is all during this time, we were just making our own. For a decade or more, we're just making our own flyers and doing our own graphic design and stuff. Not that I would claim to be a graphic designer, but it wasn't like such a fresh idea. So we just, everything's in-house. So like the Nuff Said thing was like, we're doing all the artwork, we're doing all the recording, we're going to mix it, blah, 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 blah. and the end game was to do everything on wax. So this is when Corduroy Records is still in Morty Alec. It's like a dungeon down there, you know. It's sort of, this is our local pressing plant. So I'm helping out on Lone Wolf, and he's sort of like, you know, I'm getting my solo record together. I think I did 3 beats on Lone Wolf. So I did the Lone Wolf beat, the Ness beat, and then the beat with Esoteric from Boston.
Yeah.
We collabed on that beat, and then some other stuff on there. I think pretty much recording. I was recording his vocals and a whole bunch of. So basically, like from Nuts, Rock the City, it was kind of like all hands on deck.
But recording with the computer set up now, or are you still doing it?
Yeah, it's all the computer set up.
So
from
that
this
opens
point.
up everything.
Yeah, so basically, like this is why everything starts coming out in rapid succession, is because the technology is there now, and you know we can actually start really just punching shit out.
Yeah,
and it's just like everything's so much quicker.
Your sample time is infinite.
Sample time is infinite. You know, it's just everything's gone into overdrive now. So
is it hard to get your head around that when you've had 2, 3, 4, maybe you had 30 seconds, but now you can sample whatever you want? Is it like the open slather? Does it is it hard to get like to use that creatively, because you're like, I don't know.
No, it's like it just opens up to stuff that I would have to, like, say, get a violin player in or a cello player to sample them, or do something weird to make it work, or just find samples with using real players. Yeah. Now I could actually get someone into a studio session. Oh, I left out a whole big part of this story.
Well, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, man.
So sorry, it just occurred to me. So like,
just move the mic a little bit further.
Oh, sorry, man.
So
Yeah. I must keep bumping it. Sorry, man. You can edit this part out.
Yeah, it's all good.
So 1990 to 2000, I decided to go to university. Yeah. And so
I had a good break, a decent break.
Yeah. It didn't occur to me to do it. But another crazy thing in the 90s that I was also during that time doing was sound installation and doing more art sort of stuff. Yeah. So like there's a few like artists doing gallery shows, and I would do the sound installation or do like soundtrack for animations and stuff.
Yep.
So I knew I was going to leave a lot of stuff out, right? Because there's just so much happening in this time period.
Got all the time in the world.
So that led to me thinking that like maybe I should go to uni and do sort of sound design or do like film soundtrack.
And you're mature age now, like
you're
not like 19.
Yeah, exactly. So like I've thought about it a bit, and also I think I met a few guys living in the warehouse space in the city that were doing the course at RMIT. It was the media arts course.
Yep.
And the thing that was really appealing, it was like I knew people that were cool that were doing the course. It seemed like it was right up my alley what they were teaching and what you had access to there.
Yep.
And all of the lecturers were working artists themselves. So they were releasing either art shows or writing forwards in books and doing exhibitions.
Had a great reputation, RMIT, in the arts.
Yeah, so the arts, so media arts in RMIT was kind of like this thing. So I decided I didn't apply for any other university. I just applied for that course and ended up getting into that. So I had started in 2000 to do media arts as well. So continuing the sort of arty side of what I was doing already in the 90s. So that gave me access also to a recording studio, or several recording studios, but also at Media Arts at that time, we all got a pass key to the building, which you could use 24 hours a day. And as long as you booked in the studio time, you could basically be there overnight recording if you wanted to.
So that's fucking...
And I live in the city, so it's all happening, right?
So basically going to uni just gives you free studio all the time.
Yeah. So like I'm doing this course, I'm tapping into, film studies and like soundtrack studies and sound design, thinking that might be an actual career, like not all this other fucking around, which is not the case. It just still ended up just making records. Yeah. But so it just became this kind of like other thing, and it just also gave us somewhere kind of professional. So when overseas artists would come to like Melbourne, so I'm trying to think like Eternia and people like that. So underground rappers from England and the States and stuff would come. We'd have a studio for them to come record, which lent itself to, Nuff Said being. I don't think like the whole idea of the stuff that we were doing at the time, we were trying to like make. So I guess like international hip hop. It wasn't so much like an Australian hip hop mentality. We just wanted to work with like. I remember. This is back in the day where the internet was dial up, so we weren't sending. No one's sending us like studio sessions over the fucking internet, like on Dropbox or whatever. They're basically sending CDs or data discs in the mail, and we're sending beats in the mail. We're calling people on the phone. So we're basically connecting with people from around the world and getting.
They could pinch your beats and not credit you. And
I guess. Some weird shit happened just through miscommunication. I remember like there was an Atlanta MC I worked with at the time who ended up putting out the demo version of the track we did together. Like I had a finished, like fully like fleshed out, amazing version of it. And then the demo went out. It's like, oh, well, that's just what happens,
That's not like you just pull it down off online. That's actually been pressed.
And it's just like it's out there in the world on stuff. Yeah. So that was really cool, and that's happening simultaneous with me going to uni, me doing stuff with Prowler at Nuff Said, and also doing stuff with Rusiel, working on this dancehall record at the same time. I get this offer to go to Singapore to do some shows there.
Yep.
So I get...
As a solo performer.
Yeah, as a solo, because I have in 2001, I put my record out.
Yep.
It's either 2000 or 2001. I can't remember which, but yeah. So my first solo album comes out, and off the back of that, through as a student at uni, a Singapore student who's got some ties to Sony, likes the record.
Melbourne or back or
in Melbourne?
In Melbourne, right.
Gives the record to the guy who knows at Sony. He likes it. He asked me to come to Singapore to do this Sony sort of thing at this huge fucking Club Zouk, it's called.
Yeah, like a showcase or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like for a Sony. One of the gigs is for a Sony party, and the other one's a solo show at Club Zouk as well.
Become an international artist.
International artist. Here we go. So I end up. I get Rusiel, Prowler, and Chris, who's the saxophone player, come bass player at this point.
Yeah.
VCA guy to come as the crew. Because we're going to do it semi.
We're
going to do it semi-live.
Yeah,
we're going to do this. We're doing it live. So we rehearsed this gig. So we had Prowler rapping and doing cuts, Rusiel rapping, me on drums, and Chris on bass, and the rest coming off all like my samples and backing tracks, basically.
Yeah.
And we do these gigs. It was just crazy. Like
well received.
Yeah, it was like the party was insane. It was kind of like this thing called, they labeled it the Basement, and it was kind of like it was like a themed big party in this huge club where they decked it out to be like someone's kind of like basement in their house. Yeah. So they had like sort of like washing machines and old organs and stuff. But like, you'd lift up the lid of the washing machine and it'd just be like ice in there and all these free drinks and stuff. And it was just this crazy party going on. They also invited a DJ, these two guys from the US, I think, to like DJ there. It was just this thing. Anyway, it was just a weird, they had the money. I guess Singapore's got a lot of money. They just invited some idiot from Melbourne to come and like play a show there. So that happened. And then me and Ruben were basically trying to make video clips with these guys from South Melbourne. I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. But yeah, it's like doing whatever records were happening between 2000 and 2004 or 5, I guess, on Nuff Said. So a lot of different things happening, a lot of records coming out. I'm helping on like mixing and mastering and graphic design with all those Nuff Said records through that sort of 4 or 5 year period. Simultaneously getting my degree, I ended up doing an honours degree. So I do 4 years of uni.
So that's interesting because I feel like you just went there to kind of, because you knew your shit, but you wanted to do the honours as well. Yeah.
I ended up really loving it. Actually, my honours degree project was an opera. So I ended up doing this kind of like sampled up kind of like surround sound with Derm, who was like teaching voice at Melbourne Grammar. at the time, and ended up using the church there to record in and doing a surround sound recording of these like choir students and stuff and soloists, and then melding that
When are you
with
going to
like.
get a chance to do that again? So you may as well.
It's just the thing, yeah. So no one's ever heard this stuff, but like I ended up doing, so it was like played it back as a surround thing for my honors degree, but it was just like all sound design and some crazy, so just the arty side of the stuff I was doing, I guess.
Yeah.
So doing street
got to
records
nerd
and
out a
rappers
bit.
and nerding out and doing art stuff as well, and at the same time still doing some gallery stuff, and still doing some soundtrack for short films and
You're
animation.
busy, dude.
I'm busy, I'm just fucking churning stuff out. And also at the same time I meet, I should backtrack a couple of years actually. So around 2000, 2001, I think Pegs is just getting started with his first few records. I contribute to his 12-inch. I do a remix for something that comes out on that 12-inch. I do.
Where do you meet him? How does it through Prowler?
This would be through Prowler because I'm always backseat, not talking.
Okay.
Right. So
So you're
I'm
just,
just kind of like, I'll get it done. I can do all this shit.
Yeah.
I just don't really want to
but do people
meet
then
people.
you let your music do the talking. But
Yeah.
do people then just go, yeah, he'll sort it out though? Like, and you
Right.
get lumped with too much shit though?
I just was like
You'd say yes.
smashing through it. I don't know. It just seemed like fine, you know. So yeah, I started working with Pegs on Capricorn Cat.
Yeah.
I think I did half the beats on that record, and Derm did a couple, and then Jace did some.
Who did the artwork for that?
I'm gonna say it was Mexi, not 100%.
Yeah.
But that's just a few. There's like so many records in this time period, right? That I'm working on. It's just crazy the amount of stuff that's being churned out while doing uni, while everything else is going on.
But also now things are digital, so it becomes the workload is.
That's right, yeah.
Your workflow is better.
My workflow is better, and opportunities are there, and the internet's more of a thing. So communications easier. We're getting stuff done overseas. We're getting stuff done in Melbourne and interstate. It's all happening. I end up getting asked by, was it during this record? Maybe it was like not until, so I do another solo record. And I remember being a bit disappointed and having a big chat to Prowler about what Nuff Said we're doing. Because I think at this point I was just sort of like, there was like a policy of not really doing advertising and not really doing any sort of media.
But the streets knew about it.
The streets knew about it. That was the whole ethos, right? Yeah. So it was like I was starting to not be a great fit for Nuff Said because I wanted to like push my stuff to a wider audience. And I thought, you know, I was doing these gigs and things. It's like I could be doing these gigs if people fucking knew my records. You know what I mean? Like, but they're just not getting out there, you know?
Yep.
So 2004, I worked on Muff's record, his solo record, More Than Music.
And you meet him through Pegs, I'm guessing?
I met him through a previous record, because Nuff Said do a compilation. I do a remix of one of Muff's tracks and I do a remix of someone else's track. Muff likes to remix us for beats for his solo record. I end up doing half that record. That goes really well. End up doing a bunch of other little compilation beats for him for other stuff. But I'm working with a shitload of other people simultaneously to working with him.
Because the scene's popping off a bit now. The people.
Yeah, and if you're a guy that can fucking get stuff done and it's good, then you know you're there and you're just doing it, right?
Yeah.
So that's all happening. Man, I'm skipping through a lot of stuff. But
Man, there's no. If you got to be anywhere, I don't.
No.
Chill, we're talking.
I remember a huge setback, and this was like one of these things where, like, you know, there's been a bunch of setbacks and bands falling apart and all this stuff. I remember Rusiel, we finish our record with the dancehall record. The idea is to maybe shop it around. Let's see what we can do with this record. Really love the record.
To major labels?
Well, I'm not really even sure. Like, I just think we need to find this a home. It's like, you know, I have a history of dub music and reggae and dancehall. Finally made one with an MC that can actually you know, do that stuff. I'm stoked. We have this record done. he ends up getting an offer to get signed, I think based off the stuff that we're doing, which is the kicker, through to get signed to Universal. But they want to pair him up with Catalyst to do the beats. So I'm gutted, but at the same time, I'm really happy for the dude because I know he just wants to get signed. So it's like
Catalyst is really sort of.
Yeah, I think he's like a, you know, he's comes from like doing I'm trying to think of his group that he had. But anyway, yeah, he's got his solo record out as well. This is a muddle. These 2000 to 2004-5 is like a lot of shit happening. So it's all like it's all a bit of a muddle, right? Yeah. It's like it's chaos is what it is. I always say this about history of anything anyway. It's like there's no clear lines, you know what I mean?
Well, what you remember is different to what someone else remembers.
Exactly. It's all just chaos. There's nothing happens without something else happening.
Yeah.
And also like there's fucking mad tangents of lineages of history to make that one thing, and just like you're right, it's just one person's recollection of how it went, you know, and it could be a totally different story from someone else's perspective. It's the Rashomon fucking effect, right? Yeah. Anyway, where was I?
Well, yeah, man. I don't even know where to go because there's a lot happening there. So.
I try to get that. I try to get those beats. So I get an offer to sign to, like, at the time, there's like another label that are doing the Good Vibrations Festival. They have a record label as well. They're interested in signing this stuff, but they want to do like, they want it to be my instrumental stuff, but they also really like this dancehall shit. I was like, yeah, I reckon I could probably amalgamate some stuff, some instrumental stuff in with the dancehall stuff and try and make a cohesive record.
Yep.
It turns out that Universal don't want any other things coming out while they've signed Rusiel, so that shit's all canned. And the Good Vibrations guys don't want to sign it without the vocals, so I'm dead in the water on that record. I ended up, over the next 2 years, I ended up just siphoning out the instrumentals to other projects.
Yeah, well, at least you got to use them.
I got to use them. Some of them never came out. I just wrote it off. It was just like there's been a few of those times where you just work on something and it just becomes like it's just a dead project. And I think there was like also, well, this is a really horrible thing as well. So I leave Nuff Said in a really horrible way. Pegs wants to, I'm missing out some stuff here. So we make Axis, right? Yeah. We make Axis the record. Pegs wants me to tour with him with DJ Select. Mm-hmm. So I end up going on the road with Pegs. We're a trio doing Capricorn Cat and Axis material. And because I've produced a bunch of Capricorn Cat and I've done pretty much the majority, apart from 2 tracks that Suffer did on Axis, I can pretty much do whatever with the instrumentals there and make a show out of it.
Yeah.
So we do that. This is in started 2004. Mm-hmm. Might even be a bit earlier than that because Muff and Plutonic are not a thing at this point.
Right. Yep.
We go on the road. We do shows all like festivals and a bunch of stuff all up and down, you know, the East Coast and we go to Perth. We do all sorts of stuff, and then we get
Triple J's jumped on board by this stage.
By this stage, Triple J has jumped on board.
Opens up the fucking
a bit. This must be 2003, and then we get the support for the Hoods calling tour. Mm-hmm. So it's me, Pegs, and DJ Select on the calling tour, and I think we start in Tassie, and then we just go all over. Yep. We get to Melbourne, and you must have heard this story before.
I was at that gig, or one of them at
the corner.
At the corner, yeah.
So this is the moment where fucking Nosebleed section becomes gangbuster, and you know they end up booking from one show, ends up becoming 4 shows in a row. We're doing the support. Muff is doing a solo set at 1 or 2 of these shows, and half of his set is like unreleased material from Muff and Plutonic, the first record.
But so have you produced it?
I've produced it, and we haven't put out anything yet. We're actually just working on it.
So he's
doing those songs live
because of the Obese connection.
Yeah. So now we're sort of like the other thing. So I still haven't signed to Obese though. So I get during this is like this whole year. So like doing the calling tour, doing Axis, I'm starting to work with Muff on the we don't even know it's Muffin Plutonic yet. We're just doing a thing.
It's just Muffin.
I think we have actually. Well, what happened was he was like, I like working with you. Basically, I like what you did on the solo record. Let's just do a whole thing together. And me being from bands and I've done this thing with Rusi. I was like, let's fucking try this thing again. We'll do it. Want to do it as a duo? Do you want to do it like we'll both get equal billing? Because at this point, I'm still doing solo records. I'm still thinking of myself not so much as just a producer for other people. I also want to be the artist, and I can do production for other people. Yep. I figure it's just because it's worked out well so far to keep some kind of line of my own stuff going.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like it's a smart fallback thing to have me as an entity and also be doing production for other people. Yeah. I feel like it's a good swing at longevity somehow. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of got...
You're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, yeah. It's got some wheels on it. And I don't even know if this is my idea, honestly. I'm just saying that like this is how I can't remember the conversation, but somehow we came to like the idea that we were going to do it as a duo.
Yeah.
But that record is not out yet. And then I've put out my second solo record already, and I'm working on a third. And Pegs wants to sign this one to Obese, and I'm keen to do that because I see the amount of effort that he's putting into other people's records, and they're spending money on a publicist and doing all this stuff. And it's like, fuck, I want a publicist, you know what I mean?
Because he had the calling, which was on Obese,
but even before that, I think he was like, you know,
championing other records.
He was, yeah, it was like I don't know if he knew what he was doing 100%. But he was definitely giving it a good crack, right? It just being a record label and sort of having a much higher turnaround of releases, maybe.
And a bigger picture mentality.
Picture mentality. It wasn't just like, we're not going to fuck with the mainstream. Nuff Said was more kind of like, you know, stoic and kind of like, this is what we're like an underground independent label. Mm-hmm. We do this thing. We find a lot of this other shit kind of almost repulsive.
It's all about the art.
It's all about the art. It's a very kind of like, you know, it's a fucking great ethos to have, but it's like you can be stuck there as well, which is kind of how I was starting to feel.
But from their point of view, they're like, well, this is what we do. We don't want to be commercial. We don't want to be on the radio.
There was never any promises to be anything else. So it's not. Yeah, it is what it is, right? Yeah. So yeah. So I'm keen to sign my third record with Obese, and that causes problems with Nuff Said due to the fact that like now Nuff Said have ties to a rival hip hop shop in Richmond.
This is it.
This is it. So like, and the funniest thing about this whole story is like, I'm in a rock and a hard place. I'm just thinking about the music, which is what I've always done. It's like the music comes first, all this other shit. I don't own a record shop. Yeah. So I don't have a horse in the race there. But like the funniest thing about that whole time period is Jaws, who was running This Is It, was my fucking shoulder. It's just like he was my ear to like, what am I gonna do? Yeah. And he was just like, man, you just gotta do what you gotta do. So.